Okay, so far we've been spending most of our time in the stream channel. Now we're getting into a part of the stream that we surveyed originally in the introductory module when we did the introductory stream habitat survey. Now, this is a section of Hastings Creek just upstream of where we did the initial survey, and what we see here behind us is a section of stream bank that's eroding. The riparian vegetation is missing from the stream bank. So what we'll cover is how to go about planning a streamside planting project. We'll look at what sorts of species would be ideally suited for this project at this site. We'll cover how to plan a planting plan, and then we'll talk a little bit later about the types of vegetation that we'd use and what the planting techniques are. Okay, this site here is obviously a human-made site. This is a park on Upper Hastings Creek, and what's happened here is the natural vegetation that used to grow along this bank has been removed and replaced with grass. Now, natural riparian vegetation is really critical to the health of the stream. It provides a lot of important services to the stream. One is obviously root structure along the bank. Now you can see on this bank here, because there's no root structure other than really shallow grass roots, the stream, every time it's come up in flood, has cut away the bank. What we saw in a healthy section of stream was that there's natural erosion that occurs and the bank undercuts and the roots hold the bank in place. So you end up with a nice deep undercut, which is good habitat for fish. When you don't have any root structure in the bank, the soil falls away and it keeps collapsing. It undercuts, the top collapses, and the process continues. And the stream channel gets wider and wider and wider. You end up with a very shallow stream channel, lots of sediment in amongst the gravel. You can see in this gravel bar right here at this site, there's a lot more fines, silt and sand in the gravel than there was at the healthy site. One of the other important things that natural streamside vegetation would provide for this site is shade. In the summertime, when you've got direct sunlight on the stream, this open channel here would probably warm up several degrees over the course of the day. And when you've got small pockets of water off to the side of the channel where fish are stranded or potentially stranded, those high temperatures can be lethal and they'll kill the fish. So shade is really important. One of the other things that the streamside vegetation does is it provides leaf litter. The leaves fall off of the trees into the stream. Small microscopic animals feed on that leaf litter and slowly break it down. Then you have insects that live in the gravel start to chew on that leaf litter. They in turn are eaten by the fish, which in turn are eaten by the birds, and so on. So this leaf litter fall into the stream is really important. It probably accounts for close to 90% of the energy budget for this stream. It's very important in small streams. One of the other things that the riparian vegetation provides is a bit of a filter from runoff on the adjacent land base. So on this particular site, you might have lots of fertilizers being used to keep this grass green. The vegetation on the stream bank actually soaks up some of that fertilizer and silt that might be running off the land base. So that's another service that vegetation provides. The root structure along the bank also allows rainfall, when it hits the ground, to penetrate into the soil more easily. So rather than running off the ground and into the stream and causing flooding problems, that water follows the root networks down into the soil and it recharges the groundwater, so that in the wintertime you have fewer floods because more of the rainfall is going into the soil. And in the summertime, the water table is higher, so you've got better summer stream flows than you would if you didn't have any vegetation. So those are a few of the important services that streamside vegetation provides. Now what we'll look at is how you would go about laying out a planting plan if you wanted to revegetate this section of stream. Okay, when you're considering planting a site, first of all, you want to look at the time of year. Now, the best time of year to do a planting project is in the winter time, late winter, while the plants are still dormant, just before the buds start to break open. So typically on the coast, that might be somewhere around late February, early March. If you're up in the interior or in a colder part of the province, it might be later in the spring. It might be April, May. So winter is the best time during the dormant period. When you're thinking about a planting plan, probably the best time to do that is in the summer before your planting project, because you want to be able to go to a section of the stream fairly close to the site that you're going to plant and see what's growing there naturally. Now we're just downstream of the park that we just looked at, and as you can see there's some native vegetation growing here. What you would do is go to that site, identify the species. There's some good books available that will help you identify native species. You go to that site, identify the species, look at where they're growing in relation to the stream bank, what sort of spacing there might be between them. In the back of the module, the Streamside planting module, there's a table that lists a number of good species that you would use for streamside planting. It also lists the site preferences, whether they like a dry site or a wet site, whether they need sunshine or shade. So refer to that table when you're laying out your planting plan. But in this particular site, it looks like we've got a few alders. There's some huckleberry growing here. We've got some salmonberry bush over there, thimbleberry here and behind us. There's some large conifers here. It looks like mostly cedar and hemlock just downstream. Just around the corner there I can see some elderberry. So there's quite a diversity of native plants here, and that's what you want to mimic when you're laying out your planting plan for your site. Try to maintain that natural diversity, because different types of critters like to feed on different types of plants and leaves. So if you've got a diversity of streamside vegetation, that's going to in turn create a diversity of animals living in the stream, wildlife living along the stream. Okay, here we are at our planting site. Imagine this is a cold, blustery, wintry day. It's raining. Actually, the best day to do this sort of project is on a cloudy day like this. And it's even better if there's a little bit of drizzle or rain happening, because the plants stay nice and moist. Now, you're probably going to have a bunch of volunteers showing up at your site, anxious, ready to go. They've had their cup of hot chocolate and they're raring to go. And the last thing you want to do is have them go to a pile of potted plants and start planting willy-nilly, because you went to all the trouble of establishing a planting plan. So what we found is quite useful is to use colored flags, and each color represents a different species of plant at your planting site. And you look at your planting plan and lay out the flags according to what species go where. So when the volunteers get to the site, there'll be a colorful field of flags that'll show them what species are planted where, and off to one side you'll have quite a few of these potted seedlings ready to go. Okay, we're just finishing off our planting plan here. We've followed the plan that we've got on paper. We've laid out stakes representing the different species. What you'd normally do, and you've learned this from going to a naturally vegetated spot, you'd normally plant the small shrubs, things like willows. So these green flags here, lime-colored flags, would represent willows, which normally like to be close to the stream. They like wet conditions. They can stand to be inundated in water for fairly long periods of time without being killed. So you'd probably put some willows here. And then a little further back, you might have some of the larger shrubs, maybe a cluster of red osier dogwood over there, maybe some salmonberry here. And then as you go farther up the bank, you would plant some of the larger trees that provide shade over the stream. Up here you might have some cedar and hemlock. Maybe some alder, although alder tends to seed quite well on its own. And the reason you want the big trees is not only for the shade, but after they mature and fall into the stream, they provide some of the large woody debris that we had seen earlier in the stream survey, and that also provides good habitat. So the site's ready to go. Bring on the volunteers. Okay, we're ready to plant here, and most likely on the day of planting, the types of plant stock that you'll be using will either be cuttings, as in the case of this, or rooted plants. We'll talk about cuttings first. Normally what works well from hardwood cuttings, which are the cuttings you'd take in the winter months, are the willow species and the poplar species. Now we'll imagine this is a cottonwood cutting. It's not really, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll pretend that this is a cottonwood cutting. When you're planting a cutting, you need a tool called a dibble, which is this tool here. It's just made of rebar. It's fairly cheap to put together, easy to put together if you know a welder. It's got the foot peg on here, and you also need what's called a vole or a mouse guard, and this is to keep voles and mice from chewing on your cutting. Normally if you're planting in a grassy area, maybe not so much in cultivated grass like this, but if you've got something like reed canary grass, which gets fairly high, you'll have lots of little critters living in that grass, and they just love the bark on these tender young cuttings. And what happens is they will chew all the way around the cutting, and once they wring the cutting completely, it'll die. So a vole guard is what you want to use in a site like that. Now the length of the cutting, normally you want to have at least 2 or 3 buds on the cutting, because the buds that go in the ground, and you can see here, these are the buds, these little nodes sticking off the side of the cutting. The buds that are in the ground are what will form the roots, and the buds that are above the ground are what will provide the leaf. Now, you can have a cutting that's too long. If you have a cutting that's longer than this, with lots of leaf nodes on top, what ends up happening is you've got all this leafy foliage above the ground and a root system below that's trying to become established and at the same time provide the nutrients to those leaves. So what ends up happening is you may get some dieback on the top. The rule of thumb is that you want a cutting that's going to be probably as high as the vegetation around it that it's going to be competing with. So just use that as a general rule of thumb. Now, when you're getting ready to plant the cutting, okay, we laid out this site here. This is actually where willows were going to go. So we can pretend this is a willow cutting. I think I said it was a cottonwood, but we'll pretend it's a willow because this is what we had planned for this site. Take the dibble, and you want to step on it so that it goes into the ground at least half as long as the length of the cutting. Okay, so once you've got your hole in, oh, I forgot to mention, probably the first thing you want to do, you probably don't need to do it here, but if you've got competing vegetation, tall grass, you would want to take a shovel and just scalp an area, probably, a meter in diameter, to try and get rid of any competing vegetation that cutting will have to compete with. So you've got your hole, put the cutting into the ground, and you'll feel it hit the base of the hole that you've made, and just push it a little bit farther into the ground just to make sure that the nodes are in contact with the soil. And then take your dibble and put it in the ground just an inch or 2 away from the cutting, and lever it towards the hole to make sure that the soil is packed in around the cutting, so there's no air spaces. Okay. Then the last step is your vole guard. That can just go over the top like so, and make sure that you twist it into the ground a little bit, because what will happen is if you've just got it sitting on top, those mice will get underneath and lift it up and chew at the base. There are different types of vole guards you can use. You can use Vexar guards, these plastic guards. They're available from nurseries, native plant nurseries. And that's pretty well it for the cutting. Now we'll move on to the technique for planting a rooted seedling. So We've got on our planting plan, we've planned to put red osier dogwood back at this site where the red flags are. I've got a native red osier dogwood here in a seedling that's about 1 year old, and so we'll pull the flag out of the ground. Again, you would scalp an area, probably 1 meter in diameter, just to clear away the competing vegetation, and then use you can use any shovel, but this is a tree planter shovel, and they work quite well, and they're available from any tree planter supply place. Now you want to dig a hole that's probably about 1.5 times the diameter of the pot of the cutting that you're putting in the ground, or the plant that you're putting in the ground. This is pretty rocky soil here. Okay, we've finished digging the hole now. Just check while your seedling is still in the pot to make sure your hole's deep enough. You want the top of the root ball of the seedling here to be just about level with the top of the hole. Also, it's a good idea to just loosen up the soil a bit in the bottom of the hole so that the roots have a little bit easier time getting established, rather than just putting them down on a hard base. Okay, so that's ready to go. So just take your seedling out of the pot, like so, and do it over top of the hole so that the soil that's in the pot and the soil that breaks away from the roots is actually falling into the hole. It's a good idea to have a little bit of the soil that the plant was growing in the bottom of the hole. It helps the roots get established a little more easily. Now this doesn't look too root bound. Sometimes you'll have roots that look pretty root bound. They'll be curled around and shooting upwards, and you may want to tease those out a little bit before you actually put the plant in the ground. But this one looks pretty good. It's ready to go. Okay, now it's important to make sure that you pack the soil in around the roots. And once you pull it out of the pot, you don't want to waste any time because the roots dry out pretty quickly. So just tamp the soil in around the plant. Watch for glass. Should actually be wearing gloves while you're doing this. Okay, we're just about at the top of the root ball now. Make sure all the air spaces are out. Okay. And now this guard is a little bit too big for this plant, but you also want to put a vole guard on your seedlings. So you'd cut this one in half and put it around the base of the plant. It's a good idea too. We're on a bit of a slope here. It's a good idea to build up a berm at the downslope side of the hole that you've dug, so that any precipitation will gather in the hole that the plant's in and keep the plant moist. So that's how you plant a potted seedling. It's important to water the plant. So after you've finished your planting project, make sure that you water the plants. Of course, unless of course it's raining really hard, then you don't have to worry about that, but it's not today, so we'll want to water everything. The next 3 years will be really important as far as the maintenance of the site. What's going to happen is native vegetation or grasses will be competing with these plants. So it's important to, in the summertime especially, in the coming year or two, to make sure that during dry spells you come out and water the site, maybe once every 2-3 weeks during really dry spells. It's also important maybe twice a year over the first 2 years, once in the spring, maybe once late summer, early fall, to just come in and cut down the competing vegetation. And hopefully, with any luck, after a couple of years, you'll have native vegetation that's taken a pretty good foothold on the site. Okay, we've talked about laying out a planting plan for a riparian planting project. The next thing we need to talk about is where you get those native plants from to do your planting project. We're here at the Wild Bird Trust Native Plant Nursery in North Vancouver, and we're talking with Kevin Bell, who's the Chief Naturalist of the District of North Vancouver and is also a volunteer at this nursery, the Wild Bird Trust Native Plant Nursery.
Which was built with Federal Fisheries and Oceans money.
Yeah. There was actually cooperation from a lot of different
Yes, the
groups.
Parks Departments, the District and West Van.
Yeah.
And of course the volunteers of the Wild Bird Trust,
Right.
the stream keepers came down and put a lot of work in here too.
Yeah. So what is the relationship? Okay, the North Van stream keepers want to plant a project, say at the Hastings Creek site that we looked at this morning.
Yeah.
What is the relationship between the stream keepers and the Wild Bird Trust?
They contact us and they come in here, and we have all sorts of plants here, both native plants and exotics, and they can take what they want.
So why don't you explain to us what we've got here? I see some beds.
Yeah, we have capillary beds, and right here, these are all native red alders. So these are ideal for stream keeping, planting. We have quite a few more exotic European type things that have been planted in Vancouver over here, ash and elm. And right down here, this is going out to be planted this weekend. What we have is Sitka spruce, we have a number of deer fern and lady fern, we have vine maple here, and we have Nootka rose in here. So we have a little blueberry right back in here. I don't know if you can see that. So this is stuff that's going out this weekend to be planted.
So if a group of volunteers wanted to collect some native stock to plant a site with, they do that in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Could they go to, say, a site that's proposed for development?
Excellent place to go, yeah.
And select native plants from
That's
that
right.
location? How would they do that?
Well, the best thing to do is pick up plants that are pretty small, because what you have to remember with plants is what you see above ground, you basically have that in the root system beneath ground. So you want to pick something that's not too big. For example, right here I got a couple of things that I just picked off the bark mulch in the ground here. This is a seedling cottonwood, 1 year old, good size, because you pick this up, put it in it, pot it, and let it grow for a year, and you're going to have a good tree. And if you pot it, it'll be, a year from now, this great for planting.
So these would be brought back to this site, put in a pot, and then the pots are placed in these
capillary beds over here.
It's okay. Can you explain how this bed works? Why is it called a capillary bed?
Well, what you have here is you have a pot with a tree in it, and it's surrounded by bark mulch, and this, of course, is inside the box, the capillary bed. So the water is held in this box, and this protects the root system from extreme heat, extreme cold. The roots don't get frozen in the winter, hopefully, and they don't dry out in the summer. And of course, the water, the roots can soak, the tree can soak the water up out of this through the holes in the pots, and keep itself moist too. So it's very useful. This helps to keep the things going.
And it looks like it's fairly easy to construct.
It is. It's really easy.
Cedar planks.
Cedar planks. Yes. Nicely bought for us, I believe, or given. I can't remember now. And
so a lot of this is donated or provided by different organizations.
This was bought by Federal Fisheries and Oceans, but we've had stuff donated as well by different timber companies and by different businesses in North Van.
Great.
So, excellent. Yeah. People are pretty. We have a geological survey company that donates white buckets to us all the time, and they're really useful for planting trees in, because trees develop huge root systems, and the depth of these white buckets, that really gives the trees a chance to really get their roots developed.
So if there was a developer out there that was planning to build something on a site that had native plants, would one of the things that they could do would be to contact the Wild Bird Trust?
Wild Bird Trust, or myself at the District Parks Department here in North Van, or if you're in another part of the Lower Mainland, of course, or BC, you contact a local fishing rod and gun club or a naturalist group, see if anybody's stream keepers group, this one local, and see if they are into doing it. I mean, one of the things too is people, they don't need to have we're lucky we got this nursery, but You could do it in your backyard. You could have a native plant nursery in your backyard, you know. What do you need? You need some pots, and you need a bed, and some white buckets or flower pots, or, you know, these bigger black buckets, and set it up and go for it, you know. Yeah.
Now, if people don't have the inclination to do that work, I guess the other option is to buy native seedlings and
get the money out and buy them.
Fairly costly.
They're costly. I mean, you're looking at a fair bit of time and effort to grow stuff, you know. So you got to collect the seeds or the cuttings and grow them, and you're looking at 2-3 years before they're ready for planting quite often. So you're paying for that. You know, that's time, energy, and effort. I mean, right here on this bark mulch, that's another good place to look for seedlings. Is anywhere you've got bark mulch put down. I just pulled
so
these
here's
up.
a couple right here.
Yeah, there's the young cottonwoods just right here, you know, and the other thing that we just pulled up were baby salmonberry right here. And you know, you go to a place like this, you pick up these little seedlings and plant them, and you've got your salmonberry in a year.
Now, if you're out at a remote site and you've got maybe a couple of hours of travel time back to your house or your native plant nursery,
put them in
how do you
put
keep
them in something
those?
with water.
Okay.
Yeah, keep the roots wet. That's the whole thing. Keep them wet and get them planted as fast as possible, especially in the growing season like now.
Right.
In April through September, you really have to keep them wet and get them planted.
So you could have, say,
October through March. That's the best time to get this stuff.
Yeah.
October through March, because they're dormant. Don't let them dry out, and don't let frost get at the roots.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So these you'd place in a bucket. Say maybe you had a 5-gallon bucket with a little bit of soil and water in the bottom.
You know those little plastic honey buckets that people buy honey in?
Okay.
They're perfect.
Plunk them in the bottom of
and
that.
everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we had some. The other way is cuttings, right? Do you want to see those willows that we were talking about? We're just down here, sorting them into different things, but these are cuttings of willows that we took this spring right in here. There's 2 or 3 species of willow here, hooker and sandbar, and they're doing very well, you know.
These started out as a cutting maybe this long, this spring?
Yeah, actually, you can actually see how long they were right here. If you, you know, there's one just almost two hand lengths.
Yeah. So there's a lot of growth that's happened just in the last couple of months.
Yeah. And this one's doing really well. You can see it's got 10 inches there of growth, you know.
So again, the best time of year to take these cuttings is during the dormant season, just before they open their buds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these don't even have rooting hormone on them. Willows are amazing. They just you stick them in the ground and they'll go.
So this works with willow species and also the cottonwoods or the poplar species.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, it will work with a lot of other species, but you need to buy some hardwood rooting hormone at any garden store, and that really helps with all the other species.
But they're a little more finicky.
Yeah, they are. They're more finicky, but you can do it.
Okay, we found a willow plant fairly close to the stream site that we're going to plant. So this would probably be a good candidate.
Excellent candidate.
So I see you've got a pair of pruning shears in your hands. Can you show us what part of the plant?
Good pair. These are nice shears, Gary. They're yours.
That's what you want.
Yeah. Now this is the willow, and last year this willow grew right to here. And hopefully you can see the dark brown stem comes up, and then you have a much lighter colored stem coming up, and this is the actual join here from last year's growth to this year's growth. That's what you want to get right there. You want to get that. So if you just cut it, now the best time to do these cuttings is March, early April, or at the very end of June, when this first flush of growth for this year is finished. So you've got 2 times you can do it. March, early April, or end of June. So I just trim that across like that, and what you end up with is a heel, and you can just trim that back, and then you want to look at what you've got here, and you maybe take off some of these little leaves, and you might say, okay, I want to just take off the little buds where the leaf is going to be, that's going to become a little branch. You just want to open that up a bit so that it's open, You can do that if you've got longish nails. You can do it with a knife. Willows are really tough, and if you're doing this with some of the other more finicky hardwoods, you would be a little more careful.
So what does that do? What
that just allows the plant to suck moisture in through those wounds, if you like.
So normally, if you were doing this during the dormant period, obviously there wouldn't be
any leaves, so you'd select.
Yeah, okay.
And quite often with some species, it's good to put a really long heel with a sharp knife on them. But with willows and cottonwoods, you'd basically take a knife and you just cut it at so there's much more of the bottom sort of open, the way you cut carrots in a fancy way for a salad, you know, that cross cut.
Just to expose it a little bit more to water.
Okay. Now, if you're doing it this time of year, if you're out taking cuttings, you should have a small bucket with water in it, and just drop this in the bucket as soon as possible. Keep it wet. Okay. Water, water, water. And then when you get back to the nursery, straight out of that into your soil, into your potting soil. Okay. And very wet, and some shade is good, because these things, it's quite a shock.
Yeah.
So it's good to give them shade for that first few weeks when they're getting established. Okay. And willows and cottonwoods should be no problem in getting them established. They're one of the easiest things to take cuttings of.
Now, can you, okay, we've talked about taking them back to the nursery and putting them in a pot to establish a seedling. Yeah. Can you take these and take them directly to a planting site?
Yes, you could. Willows and cottonwoods are so tough that you could, you put them in water for transportation, get them to your Streamside, and just get them straight in there. Maybe plant double what you think you're going to need, and then you'll definitely get a 50% success rate with willow and cottonwood. You probably more likely get 80%.
So hard to fail with.
Hard to fail with these, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And fast growing.
Yeah. Well, we saw that.
Yeah, and really, really good for wildlife, fisheries, the whole lot. Yeah.
Okay, so we've basically talked about 3 different sources then. We can take cuttings for native revegetation. Yes. We can take salvage plants from a site, a development site, for instance. I guess one of the other things that we want to keep in mind, well, seeds. Yeah. But what about taking native stock? Obviously, you don't want to go into an area and take everything.
Well, that's right. I mean, with this willow right here, we take. We could devastate this plant. We could take all these new growth off. Well, you don't want to do that. So you take 1 or 2, given the size of the plant you're looking at, you take 1 or 2 cuttings and move on and get something else. The other thing to remember is with cuttings, genetically this is exactly the same as its parent. So it's better to get a good diversity of cuttings from different places, so you don't end up with one, not only you've got one species of willow, but it's genetically exactly the same.
So maybe 1 or 2 cuttings from one plant and then go to another plant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you got diversity there.
That's good to remember.
Yeah. So, yep.
Good. Okay, so cuttings, seedlings, salvaged from a site,
and
come to a native plant nursery and get potted plants, seeds, and then I guess the other option is to buy them from a nursery if you've got lots of money.
Well, you get a grant or somebody gives you some money. Hey,
Okay.
Why not?
Good, thanks. And I guess you're always looking for volunteers.
Hey, always looking for volunteers and always looking for plants.
Great.
Yeah, anybody can phone us at the Ecology Centre or at Wild Bird Trust and let us know if they think they've got plants we could use. We want just about any sort of plant.
Great. Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Okay, no problem. We'll see you.